So today's project on the Camaro is underneath. I've been running it now for quite a while. I've been worried about whether the rear axle lube was okay. Does it have enough? The car's just passed 100,000 miles in 35 years, and perhaps it's worth a change. But frankly, the problem I've been having is that the fill plug, it wouldn't come out. I've tried a couple of times. So I put some penetrating oil on it, figured I'd let it soak a couple of weeks and come back. Today I'm back to try it again. The car is on ramps. Back end of the car is on ramps. It's elevated so I can work underneath. It's still kind of tight clearance, so I was sort of having trouble getting underneath, bringing the camera and doing the heavy work. So what I'll tell you is, so far, I do now have the fill plug out. You won't see that part. I'll show you where the plug is and what I had to do. But let me describe in advance. The plug was stuck. It's a pipe plug with a 3/8 inch square socket drive. And normally, for the most part, you take a 3/8 inch extension for a socket wrench, for a 3/8 socket wrench, and you turn it out with that. But this one's somebody's been doing that before, and I tried with that tool and it wasn't enough because it wanted to slip out, and I was getting concerned that if you slip it too much and you round out that plug, you'll never get it out without using, I was looking at the options. I've done differentials before, but I've never had a plug this tight. And again, perhaps sitting in the garage in the humidity for years and years and years and years, it's kind of stuck. They're only supposed to be torqued to about 20 foot-pounds, so boy, you'd think they'd come out easier. Soaking it with penetrating oil wasn't enough. That still wouldn't go. So then the next trick is heat. Now a lot of times you can heat the part, you can heat with a torch, but when you get to a cast iron rear axle assembly, there's no way you're going to get that whole thing hot with a torch, especially with conventional propane torches, which is what I have. There is a school of thought that says what you do is you heat up the plug, and you heat it up really good. As best you can with a propane torch. But you focus on heating and expanding the plug, so that if it has rust around the perimeter of the plug, you expand that plug out with heat and you crush the rust. Then take the heat away, let it cool down. Then when it cools down, spray it with penetrating oil of some sort. But the theory is that you expand the plug with heat. When it cools down, you hit it with a lubricant that will then get sucked into the threads. And then you have a better shot at getting it loose. So I did exactly that. I put my propane torch, good old standard, with about that much flame right on the plug. Probably spent 5 minutes or so of heat straight on the plug. Just be patient. Just put it right in the socket and let her go. You don't want to burn the oil up that you're going to spray on it. And I sprayed it with a little penetrating oil after it cooled down. Let it sit in. I went inside, sat down, took a break for about an hour, just let it set in there and work. And when I came back out, I put my 14-inch breaker bar and a new tool that I bought. I should have led off with this probably, but in the time, in the last couple of weeks since I failed the last time with the 3/8 drive, using a 3/8 drive socket extension, there are some tool companies that make, I'll see if I can get this up close. This is a square drive, 3/8 inch. They actually make one that's a half drive, but I wasn't sure. The half drive is bigger in diameter, and I wasn't sure whether I had enough real estate to get that in there. But this is a 3/8 inch drive square socket that is designed for a 3/8 inch pipe plug. And if you'll notice, compared to a socket extension that's nice and rounded on the corners and edges, and then also has a ball socket on one side, this guy has sharp corners is nice and square. And you still, with the breaker, you still have to be careful with this because it is possible for it to tip and work its way out of the socket. But this one worked pretty good, and I would guess once I did the heat-cool cycle, I came back from my break, put the breaker bar on it. Took me about 2 tries, and I probably had to put 75 pounds. I might even gone 100 foot-pounds. I might have gone 100 pounds on the breaker bar. I mean, I was holding on to the stabilizer bar on the bottom of the car, pushing with the other hand. It's a little awkward because, again, the wrench wants to tip and bring that out. But all of a sudden it went pop and came loose. And I'll take the camera down underneath now and show you a little closer what I've got. So I want to take the plug out. I'm going to check the level and see where it's at. But I think what I would really like to do is I have a suction tool. I want to see if I can get a suction hose in there and suction the fluid out, even if I don't get a complete change. I just don't know when they changed it last. So I'm going to see if I can get the suctioned out and refill it with some 80W90 GL5 that I happen to have that meets the GM spec. Here's the back up a little bit. So there's your rear axle assembly, my rear axle assembly, with the stabilizer bar to grab a hold of. When you come around to the front side, there's the filler plug. And you can see it's all oily. Now there's a little bit of oil that I think came down from the vent. The rest of it, the residue around the side here, is from me spraying it with penetrating oil. Although you will notice back in the back, one of the reasons I wanted to check is that there is a little bit of oil that's been, I'll say it looks like it's been slung off of the pinion seal up at the front. Not enough to make a drip, but there's a little bit of residue. Some of that residue looks very, very, very old. But oh, and also while I was under here, you'll notice the U-joint yoke is wet. I sprayed that with penetrating oil also. Right now I think the universal joints are probably okay, but I may at some point soon want to pull the prop shaft out and just feel them and make sure they're good. So in the meantime, figured the best thing to do is to start prepping it. So anyway, a little bit of oil. So let's see. So here's the socket type plug. And you can see, if you get a good look in there, that socket's, somebody's been in there before with a wrench that wasn't quite as good. And the way this works, there's my tool, and it is specifically designed for pipe plugs. So I put this guy in there like so, and used my persuader to, it's loose already, but I'm just, might as well show you, got it banged in there, and then use my extension, then use my trusty Craftsman breaker bar, and a lot of push. So let's see if I can get her, it's already broken loose, so let's see if we can get her out of there. Just spins out, and you can see that the plug itself is really not in bad shape, except for kind of the top 2 threads. The rest of them are good, but the very edge threads here are a little bit corroded, and I think that's what was holding it up. So we'll set that aside for a minute, and then I have an Allen wrench. The spec is that the fluid ought to be within 3/8 of an inch of the bottom of the fill plug. And the back of the car is up a little, so it's not quite level, but you've got housing to the back, housing to the front. It shouldn't knock it off too far. So let's see what we get if I just dip this in. Let me just pull that out. You can see the fluid is almost, it's like right up to the bottom of the fill plug hole. So that's, you know, maybe, here's the other side. So maybe it's an 1/8 inch below or so. Not bad. So while it may have thrown a little bit of oil, it isn't thrown much. And now the question will be whether I can get my hose in there. So I'm going to set the camera down for a bit. I'm going to try to get my my suction system lined up. Now what I have is one of these big suction pumps from Griot's Garage. And I wanted to use a bigger hose, but I couldn't get it down in the diff. But right now what I've got is what I think is about a 1/4 inch hose inserted in the diff and pushed down as far as I can go. And we're going to see what we can get out of it here. The method of this is that this big tank on this is supposed to be a suction and hold vacuum. And I've not, frankly, not used this one before. It's brand new to me. But it expels air when you push down. And then it puts a suction in the tank. And it's supposed to be pulling on the oil. So we'll see how this works. There, that time it worked. I'm going to let it set. The way I understand this one to work is that you get a good dose of vacuum pumped up on it, like that, and you just let it sit and the vacuum will keep pulling. You don't have to stroke it continuously. You can probably see that the fluid's in the tube, and it ought to be filling up that container. I'd like to prop this up a little bit so that it's not laying flat. Like so. There we go. And I can see that it is collecting fluid in the bottom. It's probably better if I could take the back cover off and drain it completely, but we'll see how much I can get this way. I may still go back and do that later, but it'll make me feel better to get a quick change in. So for right now, if I can just get the majority of the fluid out and get some fresh additives in there, I think I'll be happy. And as I say, we'll see how much fluid I can collect out of here. Well, here's a status check at 15 minutes in. You can see that I'm collecting a fair amount of axle lube, and the tube is still full, so it's still pulling lube. I'm going to go back in and go back in the house and relax and let this thing keep going until we get it till it's done. Check back later. Well, it's been about another 5 minutes. I'm up to about 20 now. But you can kind of see, I heard it starting to do that, to suction. And you can see that it's starting to pull some air, so I must be down to the bottom. That was pretty nice though, to be able to pump it up and walk away and just let it go to town. So I'm done with my pulling out fluid. You can see how much is in that in the bucket there. Each one of those lines is a liter. So it looks like, what have I got? About 1.5, maybe 1.4 liters. And nearest I could find online is it's about 3.5 pints in English terms. 1 3/4 quarts. And if I remember right, 946, that's about 1.6 liters. I have most of one bottle in the diff right now. There's the opening. You can see it's a messy job, so you got to have cardboard underneath and enough rags. And I jacked the car up. The rear wheels are still on the ramps, but I lifted the body some and put a jack stand underneath, so I could get a little bit more height between the exhaust pipe and the differential to get a little better angle on what it takes to get oil in that guy. Here we go again. I didn't quite get the first bottle emptied, but we'll add the second one the best we can just by squeezing the bottle. Now this part would be handier. Would work better if I had a gun that I could shoot it in with, push it in with like a grease gun. Well, I'm going to set the camera down for a couple minutes here so I can use both hands again. I can't get the tripod underneath, so we'll see what we can do here. Back in a minute. Well, that only took me about another 2 minutes once I got both hands on it, and as you can see I've got fluid running back out. So I'm just going to let it set here for a couple minutes, and here's my bottle of fluid. I poured the two together, and there's about 22 ounces is the line that's showing. That's 22 ounces used. So the other bottle's empty, so that's a quart. So one quart plus 22 ounces would be 54 ounces. And if the capacity of this is 3.5 pints or 56 ounces, it means I got all but 2 ounces of oil out of the bottom of that diff. That's a pretty good change for suctioning it out. Number two, there's a little anti-seize on the plug, and I used a sharp tool to very gently get the grunge and grime out of the threads. Most of those threads were clean. The ones that you see with the copper anti-seize are the ones that had corrosion in them. And we'll put this guy back in. The fluid is down to just a slow drip, so I've about got it set there. Run that in, like so. And come back with a socket wrench and run it down. Let's see if I can get a good look at this. Looks like I'm right about on 20. So that ought to be plenty. We'll stop right there. Wipe off the oily mess, clean up my mess here. And there we are, that one's good. We should be in great shape. Now I know there's enough oil in the diff. It's nice and clean at 100,000 miles. And you know, when I had the wheels up the last time and I rotated things, I didn't hear any noise out of the bearings. They sounded like they were still okay. So it's good to keep going through the car one piece at a time and seeing what else we need to take care of. But that's an axle oil change. That's all for now. After I finished suctioning out the axle, it looked to me like I assembled the hoses on this tool, on this suction tool, incorrectly. I picked this up used, and it didn't have all the instructions with it, so I've been kind of doing it on my own. But after a second look, the way this thing goes together, you have a plug here with an O-ring in it, and it has a large tube in it. It's got a piece of hose and it fits into this adapter like so. And what I should have done, I believe, instead of trying to put my other lines directly into there are two long hoses that you can put down dipsticks or into the axle, and they have a colored adapter on them, and you put this large I'll call it master hose into the adapter. What you'll end up with is a long piece of hose and then a second piece of hose attached to the end of it, where I was laying that suction device on the ground because I didn't have enough hose to get all the way to where I needed to go. But otherwise, the tool worked very well. It was really cool to be able to pump it up, put a vacuum in it, and then just let it sit there and pull while I was doing something else.